Hi, I'm Alan Nelson. In this session of KidLead, we're going to talk about the 4 developmental stages of young leader development. So if you're interested in developing leaders below the age of 20, you'll want to know about these 4 developmental stages. Welcome to KidLead. If you've been watching this series, you know that I always end with my quote, if you want to change the world, focus on leaders. But if you want to change leaders, focus on them when they're young. The reason is because after many years of working with adult leaders, I came to the realization there's got to be a better way to get to leaders while they're moldable, not moldy. One of the statistics I quote in an earlier video is talking about how the average age of leadership development, according to a survey of 17,000 managers, is 42. That's long past the time when we're moldable in our character and elevated in our cognitions. So if you're interested in developing leaders while they're moldable, below the age of 20, it's important to understand developmental stages. Because as educators and parents, we know that kids change. They change from early childhood to preteens, to adolescence, and then to older teens. So in this short video, I'm going to give you 4 developmental stages that we've learned that will help us learn how to develop their leadership style according to their age and stage. As I've traveled around the world teaching young leader development, one of my trips took me to Thailand. And on a day off, I took a tour of a Buddhist temple. Our tour guide stopped and talked to us about the lotus flower and how it is symbolic of life and their faith. And I realized that this was also a great metaphor for understanding developmental stages of young leaders, because a lotus grows under the water and then grows to emerge from the water and then blooms. So let me use those 4 stages to reflect these 4 stages of young leader development. The first is taking root. That's ages 2 to 9. The submerged stage, 10 to 13. The emerging stage, 14 to 18. And the blooming stage, ages 19 to 25. So I'm going to break down each of these and give you an overview of the focus and why each one is very important but also unique from the others. So the first phase is called taking root. That's where the seed of the lotus flower begins to grow roots in the river bottom or the lagoon bottom. And it is not observable to the human eye. And so for many of us, we overlook leaders at this age because we just see them as little kids. And yet when you start to look for them, you'll realize that young leaders begin emerging between the ages of 2 and 9 frequently. And often we can see it in playgrounds, we can see it in school. Because leadership is a social art, we can see these kids actually leading activities, leading games, getting friends to follow them, and as teachers will attest, and as parents who've seen their kids in social settings will attest, they can see that. The little boss moss, the little activator, the organizer. And so our focus during this phase is really on conditioning and character. Because their cognitions are not to the level where we can teach them concepts yet, we're going to talk to them about skills and awareness. We want to help shape their character so that when they get older, we know that we're going to have ethical leaders. And we want to condition them so that they get used to being peer-led, and we want to give them opportunities to actually lead. So we will put a leader lanyard around their neck and we'll say, hey, Johnny, I want you to lead this activity. Or we say, hey, Kelsey, I want you to lead these friends in this activity or project. And that gives them sort of an early conditioning for what it feels like to be in charge. Stage 2 is called the submerged stage because in the life of a lotus, it's growing roots deep, but it's also starting to reach for the surface of the water. Yet it's still below the surface, meaning it takes a bit of a trained eye to see the plant under the water. It's the same thing with young leaders between the ages of 10 and 13. Most adults don't see them, and so we literally have to train adults how to recognize those kids who are gifted in leadership. 10 to 13 is this amazing sort of intersection of a lot of life development issues. So we want to focus on character and competency. Character because moral psychologists say they're still forming who they're going to be in terms of their character, their morals, their values, their ethics. And competency because we see this bump up in their ability to relate to others and to converse and to begin to think of concepts. So we refer to this as the 10-13 window. As you can see from this graphic, we see a bump up in basically our moral developments. We're still sensitive and pliable before it begins to diminish in terms of our pliability. We see this bump up in cognitive ability, where the difference between a third and a fourth grader often is quite significant. And also social-emotional development. We found working and experimenting with 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds that it's just not the same as working for 10 and above, because we see this ability to relate, to handle difficult social situations and respond effectively. So this 10-13 window is what we refer to as the bullseye of our training time. Stage 2 is a very, very critical time in the life of a young leader. Stage 3 is called the emerging stage. In the life of a lotus, you can see the plant now breaking through the surface of the water, reaching for the sky. It's not yet bloomed, but you can see where the plant is. It's the same thing in the life of a young leader, ages 14 to 18. Often we begin to see the symptoms, the characteristics of young leaders emerging, and yet they haven't yet bloomed. That's why in this stage, we want to focus on competency and confidence. Competency because it's still a great time for them to learn these skills at a young age because they have very little to unlearn. So it's a very pliable time. And confidence, we want to give them the ability to think like a leader, and through repetitious projects and multiple opportunities, they're going to naturally gain confidence, which will give them other opportunities as adults begin to recognize their ability. So again, this is a strategic time in the life of a young leader, but catching them and treating them like young adults, not just kids who will eventually become a leader someday. Stage 4 is the blossoming stage. This is in the life of the lotus when the flower blooms and people walk by and they notice it. It calls for the attention. Same too in the life of a young leader. If they're gifted and talented, they probably are being noticed by this point. They're in college or they're in their first job experiences, early career, ages 19 to 25 is a great time for them to continue to learn confidence, because you want to make sure they have enough opportunities to be familiar with leading so that they can develop confidence and also connections. This is a great time for older leaders who see these young bucks, these young does, these young leaders ready for more responsibility because they look at them and they see themselves as a young person. So connecting them, helping them get on a fast track to leading and managing and being in charge of teams is very important, instead of just waiting for them to sort of climb the ladder traditionally. Allowing them to do this. Most psychologists and people who study our development recognize that by 25, our brain is kind of the adult brain. And so that's why it's good to focus on ages 2 through 24, 25 for young leader development. That's why we want to get them young, to help them have a great head start. As we've mentioned before in our videos, we offer a free assessment. If you look below in the description area of this video, you'll see a link. You can do the assessment, one for 2 to 6-year-olds, and there's another assessment that you can do on students who are ages 6 to 18. This allows you to get an estimate of the likelihood of them having leadership talent. The reason why this is important is it allows you to get these young, talented leaders early in their development. Whenever you develop them, make sure you think in terms of project-based training, because it's all about skills. It's not talking concepts. It's not being a nice person. It's actually leading a team through projects to accomplish a goal. So therefore, it needs to be team-oriented, because leadership is a social art, a social skill. And you want to be able to provide coaching, provide Socratic sort of question asking that allows them to think like a leader. That's why we've really created all of our curricula around this sort of training. And again, you will find links below in the description area that allows you to look at the different sort of training curricula available based on the ages and stages that we've just described. You know, my wife and I live near Los Angeles, not far from Hollywood, and we enjoy movies. One of the most consistent themes in movies and even TV shows is time travel. Imagine what it would be like to travel in time. Well, when you think about it, we actually can. You see, we can actually influence leaders from the future today. That's what kids are. That's what youth are. That's why we need to think of leadership development very, very young. I'm Alan Nelson, and if you want to change the world, focus on leaders. But if you want to change leaders, focus on them when they're young.